So as of just before recording this video, I have a new job, which is fun. Bit more responsibility than I'm used to since I'm going to be a team lead at the company as opposed to just like a regular employee. So a bit more responsibility than I'm used to, but maybe I can take some notes from some of the leaders and stuff like that I've talked about in my various videos. You know, be a good leader who's good at delegating tasks as opposed to Wapple who just, eats everything. I was trying to think if there are any points in time where Wapple is a good leader. I'm like, well, technically, I guess he's a good king for the evil Black Drum Kingdom, but that's not the point. So, time for the final Ashura Doji video. This will be going over pretty much the Battle of Onigashima and his legacy, because he unfortunately dies during the Battle of Onigashima. Spoilers if you didn't know that going into this video. He's one of the Scabbards where we actually see his death. I mean, like, we kind of see Izo's death, but it's a little bit different. Ashura's, we just straight up see what happens. So, what we have here in regards to continuing with Ashura, where we left off was just after Momonosuke is kidnapped by Kanjuro, and they're flying away on the crane. And this now leads into when Denjiro as Kirishiro shows up with his ships and is now, ready to help and everything, reveals himself to be Denjiro, confirms it. And then we have it that all of the other Scabbards, just glare at Kinemon because they're like, you messed up the location in the message. And he's like, no, it was all 3D chess. And then they're just like, yeah, sure, whatever. You're an idiot. And then they're just happy to see Denjiro, which is fair. From there, they're then working their way toward Onigashima, which means they have to get past the Beast Pirate ships, with Luffy and the others are kind of handling very easily, Luffy, Law, and Kid. And then, of course, we have Jinbei shows up, and he's able to dispatch the ships and everything pretty easily. So we have that part. Ashura Doji, along with a bunch of the others, Scabbards and stuff, end up in Law's submarine as they are all headed to Onigashima. They get past the Torii Gate, which works pretty well, and then it is, while they're in the sub, they're working on determining what their strategy is going to be, and this is where, Kinemon's strategy actually kind of ends up working. Their intention is to have, divide the troops. Certain ones will go around Onigashima, and then several of the other Scabbards will ride in the submarine, in the polar tank, and go around to the back of Onigashima, and then be back there and ready to attack from there. So that's where they divide up. Kanjuro and Denjiro go onto Onigashima first. They head off and split off with their various groups, as do the Straw Hats head in, and Luffy, Law's plan is just let Luffy cause a ruckus. Kid'll help. It'll be fine. They'll cause a distraction. And that works perfectly. I'm sure Law just kind of sat down with Kinemon while they were figuring it out. Just like, just bet on Luffy causing a distraction. Just bet on that. Because you can't plan what Luffy's going to do, but you can plan that he's probably not going to follow whatever plan you give him. Not wrong. I'm also still stuffed up from my sinus infection, so that's not fun. Not fun at all. So what then happens is the group that Ashura Doji is with, that are the Scabbards and some of the other minks and stuff like that, are in the Polar Tang, and Law brings them around back and then shambles them up onto the shore. And they are then met there by Nekomamushi and Izo after being dropped off by Marco. So they have that reunion there. They're all just so happy to see Izo again for the first time in 20-something years, 30 years more likely in that regard for several of them. So we have that. And then they get to the back of Kaido's mansion, and that is where they then end up having to fight against Kanjuro and his ink constructs. And they have that battle there. And of course, they have Kiku is the main one who fights Kanjuro, and they believe that she defeats him. Unfortunately, she doesn't, which literally comes back to bite Ashura Doji specifically for how this works. I mean, also bites Kiku as well, but like specifically Ashura Doji is the one that dies as a result of them not actually making sure that Kanjuro is dead. It's like, there's some alternate universe out there where it's just like, okay, are we pretty sure he's dead? Yes. Okay. Just each one of the Scabbards takes out their swords and just stabs him a bunch of times. For betraying them. I don't know how much that would be considered an indecent way of doing that by samurai standards, but it's like, well, he's a traitor. It's like, true. Or to do something that makes it so it's like they're quite certain that he's actually dead. That would have been a wise decision in this regard. Yeah, as I said, some alternate universe out there where that happened. And so then they're like, okay, so they got past Kanjuro and like the beast pirates that he was with and his ink constructs, and they start making their way through the castle and make their way to the live stage. They arrive at the live stage just after Kaido has decapitated Orochi, and much to their chagrin, I wonder if that would have been one of the moments where if they showed up earlier enough and saw it happen, they would have been like, ah, damn it, Kaido got it. Damn it. That was with style. Yeah, I gotta admit, that was pretty cool how he did it. Type of a thing. So there's that. That's possibly what would happen there. But they burst onto the live stage, onto the stage where Kaido is, and they just launch this all-out attack at Kaido, jumping him and crashing him over the banister that's there over the sidebar, and they fall to the ground, through the floor, into the ground. Fall to the floor, through the floor, and into the ground. Excuse me. And all of them are just stabbing Kaido with their swords. Izo is just unloading into him with his guns, and just Ashura, they're all just like stabbing him as many times as they can, or as deeply as they can, to just try to cause as much damage off the initial damage right off the bat. And like, it's just this great sequence that we get there, as I talk about with every single one of these Onigashima ones. Although I won't be talking about it too much. I still have to do it for Kawamatsu, and then, I mean, like, I'll talk about this moment when I talk about Shinobu's ones, but not quite as much, because she's not involved in this attack, but you get the idea. The rest of the Scabbards, I've talked about this to, like, beating a dead horse. As with a few other parts of this video I'll be getting to. And then, so they stab Kaido, falls to the floor, into the basement area. Kaido gets up, is like glaring at all of them. He's like, what are you doing? How did you get into my home? And I remember all of you. You're the frickin' Scabbards that served Kaido and everything, or that served Odin. And this, of course, leads into, like, them kind of trying to attack him again. He turns into his dragon form. And they all, like, stab him again, or, like, grab onto him as he, flies up out of the basement and up to the roof. Punches a hole through the roof. And it ends up on the roof. And all the Scabbards jump off. And then this is where we have the beginning of the battle on the roof, on the top of the Skull Dome. And, it's like Kaido and his forces, Jack and one of the numbers are up there. And then we have the Scabbards along with the Minks. The Guardians and the Musketeers and some of the other warriors are up there. And, they all go into their Sulong forms. And they're all, like, part of this battle. And they take out a ton of, Kaido's groups. Kaido's subordinates that are up there, including Jack, and then, Ashura Doji and the others are just kind of watching as this moment is happening. I mean, like, they're, like, rooting for the Minks, but they understand that it's just, like, Jack and his subordinates caused so much damage to Zou and to the Mink tribe and everything like that, that they're like, yeah, no, they deserve to get some of their, they deserve to get their licks in on him. And they just, like, kick his butt. And from there, it ends up, that fight finishes up. Kaido is like, okay, you've beat up Jack enough. Jack, head off. Go get treated or whatever. It's a little bit of care from Kaido there for Jack. He gets sent off. And now it is Kaido versus the Scabbards. And this is where we end up just having this big, all-out clash that ends up happening. Inarashi and Nekomamushi go Sulong, and, the rest of the Scabbards are, unleashing their best attacks at Kaido. I was trying to remember if Ashura Doji ends up having any really big named attacks during this. And I'm like, I don't honestly remember if he does off the top of my head. He is part of the group along with Kinemon and Inarashi, who replicate the Odin's two-sword style attack. And, attack Kaido, and they hit him in the scar that Odin gave him all those years ago. They hit him in the scar, and that causes a lot of damage to Kaido, a lot of pain and PTSD setting in. So Ashura is part of that group there, but I was trying to remember, I don't think he ends up having any other main attacks. I mean, he's unleashing attacks and, trying to cut Kaido and stuff like that, just like the rest of them are. And then, of course, there is the moment where Kiku gets where Kaido unleashes the wind size, Kiku gets attacked, and, all of that, which I've already talked about so many times. And, Kiku loses her arm, and they cauterize it, and then they just keep fighting. And, they go through all of that. And then, of course, we cut away from the battle, and by the time we come back, unfortunately, the Scabbards are all just, laid out, beaten, bloody, so badly hurt. By the time, Big Mom's up there now, and then, eventually Kid and Killer and Law and Luffy and, Zoro and Law and Luffy end up there. And, of course, the moment where Luffy walks, just, completely ignores Big Mom and Kaido and walks over to the Scabbards, to Kinemon. And, promises that he'll defeat Kaido and free Wano. And then, Law shambles the Scabbards out of there, teleports them out of there and into one of the hidden rooms, one of the treasure rooms on one of the top floors. So they're out of the way. From there, we know that then this mysterious figure, Hiyori, shows up and starts, just performing a bunch of first aid on all of the Scabbards, wrapping their wounds, probably cleaning them as much as she can, getting a bunch of that stuff done, as quickly as she can, so to try to just, at least, stop some of the pain as best she can. Getting that all done. And they're kind of out of it for a little while. They're all just, passed out at this point in time. By the time they wake up again, they're like, wait a second, how did we get down here? Weren't we on the roof, and why are we covered in bandages? Who did this? Who treated us? Who dared treat warriors? It's just take the first aid for what it is. And they're all now like, well, okay. So Luffy's now fighting Kaido up on the roof along with Big Mom, and the other Worst Generation members are up there. So they're like, okay, so what are we going to do now? And they're like, okay, well, we need to find Momonosuke. And they receive word that Momonosuke is, for where Momonosuke is. So they're like, okay, well, we need to go try to find Momonosuke. What ends up happening then is, of course, there is the moment where the doors to this treasure room burst open, and there, standing before them, is Odin. And he's like, sounds like Odin, looks exactly like Odin, acts exactly like Odin. It's just like, ha ha ha, my Scabbards, I have arrived, and I am here to assist you in this battle. Toki sent me forward into the future, managed to send me into the future before my death, and blah, 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 blah. I've been waiting, and, blah, 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 all that. And 8 of the Scabbards, technically 9 because Izo's there, but Kanjuro's not, so whatever, you get the idea. Most of the Scabbards are instantly fooled by this. And they're like, they think that it's Odin. They're like, oh my god, Lord Odin. And Ashura, I think it's Ashura and Raizo that are the two that are like, no, that's not Odin. And Ashura is the one who like pulls back the other. Is just like, no, that's not Odin. That's not the way that worked. And like, because it's not Odin, it's Conjuro's puppet of Odin that is rigged with explosives. And what ends up happening is, of course, the puppet is, of course, trying to convince them that he is Odin because his intention is to, lull them into a false sense of security before, boom. Before he pulls a Pedro, which is an insult. And what ends up happening is Ashura jumps forward and slashes one of his swords at the fake Odin's face, and it cuts, and it's not bleeding, and it's ink. And, like, Odin's not acting like he's been cut or anything like that. Now, in actual Odin's defense, he could probably get cut on the face and not care. But this is different. They're like, he's not bleeding. This is not Odin. It's one of Conjuro's ink creations and everything, constructs. And they're like, oh my god, this is not good. This is horrible. What are we going to do? And, that's when the fake Odin, now talking like Conjuro, reveals that he's loaded with explosives. Ashura jumps forward, grabs the fake Odin, and this is like just as the explosives are about to go off. And because Ashura was just like, he's the one who figured out that this was not Odin. And, this is like, I like that it was Ashura that figured this out, because, so many of the Scabbards, particularly all the ones who, lived through the last 20 years, Kawamatsu in the prison, and everything else that happened there with Kawamatsu, with Inarashi and Nekomamushi on Zou, all of that for Dendra, for all the ones who, lived through the last 20 years, and have very much had the Odin's death sink in, and probably had moments where, they all hallucinated in a dream, or just in a moment of complete and utter despair, Odin returning. And I'm quite certain that Ashura is one of those ones as well, who had those moments. And he probably had many of those moments. And very much like how, when it comes to, Black Maria's going on at various time frames during this, same arc, where Black Maria is makes Robin hallucinate her, Olvia and Clover and Saul and all of that stuff, and then makes Brooke hallucinate, his crew and everything else like that. Makes those hallucinations happen because of her just, her weird smoke that she has. And, so we have it that, a similar thing happens, and, Robin and Brooke are able to see through these illusions very quickly. It would be interesting to see what the other Straw Hats would see. Nami would definitely see Belmare. Zoro would see Kuina, probably. Sanji would see his mother. Usopp would see his mother. You get the idea. Frankie would see Tom. Chopper would see Hiraluk. Jinbei would see Fisher Tiger. You get the idea for, who the other Straw Hats would see. Luffy? I don't know who Luffy would see, because he'd see Ace. What am I thinking? Because he knows Sabo's alive now, but he would see Ace. Prior to him knowing that Sabo was alive, he would see Ace and Sabo. For, their hallucinations. And I'm sure several of the other Straw Hats would have possibly fallen for these tricks as well, for, the same trick from Conjuro, if he was able to, pull off something where it's just, he could have very easily tricked several of the Straw Hats with, a fake Odin or something like that, but that wasn't his intention. His intention is to take out the Scabbards. But, Ashura, where I started with this point, Ashura is the one who, instantly sees through this. And I think it is Raizo who is the other one who sees through this very easily. and figures out that, no, that's not the real Odin. Now, there would have been a difference here, because, like, I know that at the time when these chapters were first coming out, a lot of people were like, okay, well, I don't think that that's really Odin, but who could it be? And since we were under the impression that Kanjuro was dead, a lot of people were like, well, it's probably, like, I don't know, Onimaru or something like that, or someone else who's able to pretend to be Odin. Or maybe it is Odin. Maybe it really is Odin from the past that Toki managed to send into the future. But, like, Toki died, and even if she didn't die from her injuries then and there, I don't think she would have been able to get to Odin, because, like, even in the flashback, we saw Odin die. So it's just, like, from our perspective, there's that. Kanjuro was playing on the fact that, like, the Scabbards didn't actually see Odin die, because, like, Odin sent them flying and on their way before he was officially executed, before he was shot by Orochi, and all of that. And so there's all of that gets taken into consideration. But Ashura Doji is the one who, like, clocks that this is not Odin, and is able to prove it by slashing, the ink construct's face, and it doesn't bleed, and they realize that it's ink, and they realize that, oh my god, this is one of Kanjuro's drawings. And then the drawing then stabs Ashura through the chest with one of its swords, with the fake, Enma and Ame no Habakiri. That would have been another clue. It's just like, Zoro has Enma. That's not the real Enma. Type of a thing. I guess he could have just said, oh, I stole it from Zoro. It's like, how the F do you know who Zoro is? Type of a thing. That would have been a good question. But, like, he stabs Ashura, and then Ashura kind of, is like pushed back to the side and, like, lays on the ground as the other Scabbards are, like, in this standoff, as, like, Kanjuro is, like, speaking through the drawing, and reveals that there's, explosives underneath the garment of the drawing. And Ashura immediately gets up, takes action, runs over, grabs the fake Odin, tackles him, and sending them both crashing over the side of the banister, as he tells his comrades to stop Kanjuro from getting to going after Momonosuke, from getting to Momonosuke in the first place. So he's falling over the side with the fake Odin ink drawing that then explodes. And, like, Ashura is, like, refusing to let go of it, and the drawing is even, like, stabbing him more, and the explosives detonate, engulfing both of them, and there's just massive explosion, which unfortunately kills Ashura. And falls to the ground. The ink drawing is gone because it got blown up, and Ashura is just on the ground. Now, initially when we were reading these moments, because, like, we just had, like, Kanjuro have, like, this fake-out death just revealed to us. So now we're having this. And it's just like, okay, is Ashura really dead? So it's like that type of moment where you're like, is Ashura really dead? And then, of course, it is revealed that, yes, Ashura is actually dead. He dies during this explosion. He succumbs to his wounds. And dies. And the rest of the Scabbards, as per Ashura's last wish, like, they don't stand there, they don't mourn him, like, they take a moment, and then they all run off, and that's when they go off, and they run into Orochi, and they all decapitate Orochi again, and then Orochi goes to fight Jack, because they run into Jack, and they're gonna have that, and then, the rest of the Scabbards, head off into the varying directions of, like, where they need to go, to Kinemon and Kiku go and try to try to find Momonosuke and protect him, and the other ones go to various other places around the rest of Onigashima. And that is because Ashura figures out that this is not actually Odin, and saves the others' lives by sacrificing his own life. And we get that. And I believe part of the courtyard, there's, like, a little bit where it's just, like, where Inarashi and Jack end up fighting. There's, like, part of the explosion that was caused by, the explosion that took Ashura's life also creates, like, this hole in the ceiling in the courtyard which then allows Inarashi to go Sulong in order to defeat Jack. So they have that connection there for kind of like part of that legacy there. And then we get to Ashura Doji's final resting place. So after the success of the raid, that's, again, Ashura is one of them, along with Izo, are one of, and, many of the others are the ones who died during the raid. And we cut to Ringo, and we see Kinemon and Kawamatsu are there, and they are sitting in front of one of the shrines, one of the temples that's there in the Ringo region, in the graveyard. Inside, we see Ashura's sword and Izo's guns. And, they're talking and they're revealing that they're going to be, that they are going to build a temple that is that is built with, it's an honor, it's a memorial for Oden and Yasue and Ashura and Izo and the others who all died, not just during the Battle of Onigashima, but as like all of these ones who died trying to stand up to Kaido and Orochi over the past 20-something years. Even before Oden's death and everything, for the ones who tried to stand up to Orochi. And they're going to build that there. Now, as of recording this, we have not gotten to the Ringo region yet in Yamato's cover story. As of recording this, the last one that we saw was Yamato, along with Ulti in page 1, delivering Yasue's sword to the Enma Shrine in the Hakumai region. Which means we probably still have to see, as of recording of this, that'll go up after the next chapter. We'll probably see Kawamatsu, because they have to give him the Amagasa hat that, Toko or that Tama made for him and everything. And, see what's going on in the Hakumai region. And then they have to make their way to the Ringo region, where I'm freaking hoping I was right that that Kiku is the daimyo there. And, we'll see either the temple is already being constructed, the building is either under construction for this memorial area in honor of all of these ones who died, including Izo and Ashura, that they will have that, or it will already be completed in this time frame. And they will be able to, pay their respects to Ashura and Izo and all of that in this regard. Now, again, I don't know if that's going to be what exactly happens, but that's what we have here. That's the best that I can give you at the moment based for those thoughts. Now, another bit of a connection here for kind of something that can count to a degree as Ashura's legacy is, of course, Ashura, during his time frame, during the 20 years that the others were gone, he was the head of the Mount Otama bandits. Now, Top Knot Hill, Mount Otama, has unfortunately been burned to the ground because of stupid, unthought-out actions by Kinemon, and that, of course, leads to various things that I already discussed in the previous video, and the one before that. So there's the question of, okay, well, what's going to happen to, are they going to try to replant, any of Ashura's men who survived, are any of them going to try to, rebuild, where their base was? And they don't have to be bandits anymore, because now Ashura, now there's, Momonosuke is now in charge of Wano, and him and the other Scabbards are doing much better. And Ashura had lived in the Kuri region. That's where he had been, the Yakuza leader and the gang leader and everything else like that. And now the current daimyo of that region is Inarashi. And he is then, in charge of that and running everything really well there. Well, he had several kidnappings that happened under his leadership, and didn't really end up doing anything about it to figure out what the heck was going on. I'm like, you're a dog. Put on a trench coat and try to be Gruff McGruff the crime dog, or whatever his name was. You can try that. I don't know. Go be a police dog. And go sniff out the evil cat that's trying to steal everybody. That's trying to kidnap pretty girls. and a carpenter with nails in his nose. So, so it's not like Ashura's legacy is completely gone. It's assumedly some of his men survived. Maybe they'll go and help, hopefully they'll help serve and protect, the Kozuki family now that they are fully rightly back in power. And maybe, we'll see something that happens with that. Doubt it, but possibly. Ashura is considered one of the many heroes of Wano now, given what happened. And of course, there might be a bit of wasn't he Shuten Maru? Didn't he cause problems for some of us? Yeah. And then they realized, he was Ashura Doji this whole time and all that stuff. So, reasons. So, that's what I have here for Ashura Doji. The next set of videos will be about Kawamatsu. And then Shinobu. And then I'm going to talk about Kaido. And by the time I'm done with Kaido, then it'll be time for, I believe I'm going to talk about Tama because she is kind of like a representation of like the future of Wano. And then, of course, I will talk about Momonosuke and Hiyori in their own videos for this stuff. And then, of course, once the cover page series for Yamato's cover page story is all wrapped up and everything, I will then do like a quick roundup of where all of them are and current, new positions that they now hold that I just hadn't been able to talk about yet because when I was doing their previous videos, we didn't have that information yet. So just a little roundup of that. So that's what I have here. I thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video and I hope you have a nice rest of your day. Bye.